January 5th, 2023 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:04. We'll start with our roll call. William Scales, I know he's absent. Jeff Fleschauer.
Here.
Greg Caesar.
Present.
Lee Reeves, our new member, is absent tonight, and Jonathan Langley is present also. So next we'll move to the minutes. Consideration of approval of the December 1st, 2022 meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Greg, second.
Second.
Second by Jeff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the minutes from the December 1st meeting are approved. So next item is consideration of election of the chair for the next year. So with this, legals help me out. There's no seconds with that, so we'll just have nominations. So they're nominations for chair.
I nominate Jonathan Langley.
Second.
Okay, so nomination made. Any other nominations? All right, so we don't need a second for this, but if we can vote, I guess, so all in favor of Jonathan Langley for chair?
Aye.
Aye. So I accept. I appreciate that, guys. So next, we'll go to vice chair. Is there a nomination for vice chair?
I nominate Greg Caesar for vice chair.
Accept.
Okay, so Greg Caesar for vice chair. So let's all vote then. So all in favor?
Aye.
So no one opposed. Congratulations, Greg.
Thank you.
Make
Congratulations
sure to
you,
miss a
John.
couple meetings so you can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
Take
very much.
charge.
Thank you very much.
All right, so item number 2, we've passed that now. I think we're on to staff announcements.
No announcements. Thanks.
It was supposed to take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
All right, so our first real item tonight, it's going to be item number 3. Give you guys a second to slide down our new surfaces here. So item number 3 is a variance request to allow parking within a landscape frontage area for the property located at 701 Cool Springs Boulevard. Staff?
Thank you. The subject property is located at 701 Cool Springs Boulevard and is zoned RC12 Regional Commerce 12 District. The applicant is proposing a retail building along Carruthers Parkway. The proposed building has a landscape frontage type, which requires parking to be behind or to the side of the building facade. There is currently an existing surface parking lot that will service the proposed building. The existing parking lot is located to the side of the proposed retail building, and it is approximately 8 feet closer to the property line than the front facade of the proposed building. The applicant is requesting to allow parking to encroach into a landscape frontage area for the property, for the proposed principal building. I will now go into staff analysis. The BZA may authorize a variance only when the request has met all 3 criteria in accordance with the zoning ordinance and state law. The staff has completed an analysis of the request in light of these criteria. Criteria 1, where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of the enactment of the zoning ordinance, or by reason of exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary and exceptional situation or conditions, such a piece of property is not able to accommodate development as required under the ordinance. The parking lot is already existing on the site, and there are multiple restrictions preventing the proposed building from being 8 feet closer to the street. There are multiple utility easements that are preventing the building from being closer to the property line than the parking lot. The Mallory Valley utility easement also has an existing utility water backflow system that is preventing the sidewalk access to the building from being any closer to the lot line. Because the existing conditions of the site are preventing development and access to the building from being any closer to the front lot line, staff finds this requirement is met. Criteria 2. The strict application of any provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties for, or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of the property. Staff finds that the application of a provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in undue hardship upon the owner of the property. According to the zoning ordinance, the building is required to front Carruthers Parkway and is required to have a sidewalk with a width of 8 feet for access to the front of the building. The existing utility backflow system is preventing the sidewalk and building from being any closer to the lot line. Therefore, staff finds this criteria is met. Criteria 3. Such relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds that this proposed plan would not cause substantial detriment to the public good. Staff also finds that it would not impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. Because this proposal complies with the zoning ordinance in fronting Carruthers Parkway and having sidewalk access to the front of the building, as well as trying to place the building as far forward as possible, it is evident that this proposal is deviating from the zoning ordinance in the smallest margin possible. This shows their effort to meet the intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds that this criteria is met. Staff's recommended motion is that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to approve the variance request to allow parking within a landscape frontage area for the property located at 701 Cool Springs Boulevard because the criteria for granting a variance have been met. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, staff. Is the applicant present? If you could step forward for us and state your name for the record.
Eric Kroll, Braden Smith.
Good evening.
Yeah, feel free to add any other comments you have or kind of explanations on the proposal.
I don't. Staff explained it well, and we appreciate their report. So happy to answer any other questions you may have.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you. So next we'll move to citizen comments. Are there any citizen comments? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment?
Motion to close.
Motion made to close by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Greg. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So public comments closed. Any questions from the board of staff of the applicant?
Maybe the only question I would have is the existing parking is really what we're trying to salvage here is kind of what I'm understanding, and without having to go back and redesign parking along that strip, correct? And if we were to move that curb 7.5, 8 feet back, that probably eliminates that whole strip of parking
It does,
spaces,
yeah.
correct?
Mhm.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. If the chair would entertain a motion,
Yep, absolutely.
I would make a motion to approve the variance request for the property located at 701 Cool Springs Boulevard because the criteria for granting this variance, in my opinion, has been met.
Okay, motion for approval made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, variance is approved.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul.
So next we'll move to item 4, which is a variance request to allow an encroachment with a maximum of 7 feet into a side yard setback for the property located at 1108 Harpeth Industrial Court. Staff?
Thank you. The subject property is located at 1108 Harpeth Industrial Court, and it is zoned Light Industrial District, and it is located within the Central Franklin overlay. The property is currently occupied by Five Daughters Bakery, and they are requesting an encroachment with a maximum of 7 feet into the side yard setback. The new addition to the building, which is a walk-in cooler that services the bakery, encroaches 7 feet into the required 10 feet setback. This encroachment is a little over 3 feet from the side property line. Part of the original building, which was built in 1973, also encroaches into the side yard setback. With this request, there is a specific timeline of events to be aware of, which led the applicant to request this variance. On April 20th, 2021, their first submission in IDT was submitted and the building permit application was processed. On August 26th, 2021, the submission was accepted for review. On September 10th, 2021, the project received a conditional letter of approval from BNS. On February 18th, 2022, the building permit was issued. On March 11th, 2022, there was a footing inspection conducted. On March 30th, 2022, a foundation inspection was conducted. In the end of July 2022, the temporary certificate of use and occupancy was issued. September 27th, 2022 was the resubmittal of plans. September 28th, 2022, the submittal was declined due to the lack of cover letter. October 17th, 2022 was the next resubmittal of plans. and then on October 19th, 2022, the review was declined. Seeing this as a unique situation, as the project received a building permit and passed multiple inspections, which were performed by the City of Franklin before being informed that it is not in compliance with the zoning ordinance. I will now go through staff analysis. Criteria 1, where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of the enactment of the zoning ordinance, or by reason of exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary and exceptional situation or conditions, such a piece of property is not able to accommodate development as required in the zoning ordinance. The shape and size of the lot are unique in nature. The lot is very narrow and it gets gradually more narrow from the back of the lot to the front. As seen from the encroachment into the side yard with the original building footprint, the original building would not comply with the current zoning ordinance if it were built today because of the narrowness and unique shape of the lot. With the front facade of the building being oriented parallel to Harpeth Industrial Court to comply with the zoning ordinance, the lot line to the left of the building slants towards the building, creating a slanted and strangely narrow lot restriction to the left of the building. Staff finds this criteria is met. Criteria 2. The strict application of any provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties for, or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of the property. Seeing as the addition was granted a building permit and passed multiple inspections from the City of Franklin, having to come into compliance with the zoning ordinance at this point would result in undue hardship upon the owner of the property. The property owner was under the impression that their addition was not an issue, so their bakery business is now dependent on this addition, which is a walk-in cooler. Staff finds that this criteria is met. Criteria 3. Such relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds that this proposed plan would not cause substantial detriment to the public good. Staff also finds that it would not impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. The intent of the zoning ordinance in this case is to maintain a buffer between buildings to their side lot line that is consistent along a street or within a neighborhood. Because of the strange shape of the lot, the addition that is encroaching into the setback is not much closer to the lot line than the original building, and visibility of the encroachment is very limited. Staff finds this criteria is met. Staff's recommended motion is that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to approve the variance request to allow an encroachment with a maximum of 7 feet into a side yard setback for the property located at 1108 Harpeth Industrial Court because the criteria for granting a variance have been met. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, staff. Is the applicant present for this item? If you could state your name for the record.
Sure. I'm Isaac Meek with Five Daughters Bakery.
If you could just give us any more details you want to add to staff's comments?
That was wonderful. The only detail that I'd like to add is that we do have a letter from the direct neighbor who is the variance is affecting that is in full approval. I hope you have, but if you don't, I can give it to any of you guys.
We did, we received that.
Great.
Any other comments?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. So next we'll open the public comment. Any citizen comments? And we did receive that citizen comment in the packet. Jeff had mentioned that, but from Mark Stillman.
There were 2 letters, correct? Okay.
2, yep. All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment?
Motion to close.
Second.
Motion to close made and second, so first by Jeff, second by Greg. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All right, so public comments closed. Any questions from the board, staff or the applicant?
My question, just to be sure I'm looking at the right things, this photograph here, the lighter yellow structure is the new build?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm. All right.
So I'll ask kind of a follow-up question. So because I looked at the cinder blocks kind of on the bottom of that, is that existing or is it that whole section? Kind of on,
You can have a look here.
I mean, it is,
That's your slab, I'm sure.
So this is new.
this part's new.
The part that's
cinder
unpainted,
blocks.
the unpainted cinder blocks are new.
gotcha.
Yes.
All right.
So walk-in cooler for y'all?
It is. It was built as a as an actual addition, though, and we converted it internally into a cooler.
Okay.
And so it's not panels or something strange. It's part of the building.
Gotcha.
So it looks like from staff's perspective, was it shown on original plans, I guess, for the building permits and all that, or do you guys know?
I mean, they were starting the permit process and
Yeah.
had gotten some inspections before it was caught, so I don't know.
I'm happy to give some clarity to that.
Yeah, that'd be great if you don't mind.
It was not on the original plans that were submitted, I think they said in August. We did do a resubmittal that was not correctly done. Our contractor did in November. And the resubmittal did have the design on it.
Okay.
And then we received our permit in February. So when we received that permit in February, we thought it was for the resubmittal that apparently had never gone through, but instead it was for what was submitted in August. And so he printed the plans from November, and then when the city came out, they began operating off of those plans.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
So when the inspectors came out to inspect the addition, they didn't catch that that wasn't on the approved drawings? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? Kind of factual type questions? If not, I'm ready to entertain a motion.
I'll make it a motion to approve variance request, allowing encroachment with a maximum of 7 feet into the side yard setback. Property 1108 Harpeth Industrial Court, because the criteria for granting a variance has been met.
Okay, motion for approval made by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Greg. Discussion?
Thank you.
I think maybe the only discussion is some frustration. I can imagine the citizens' frustration with receiving a permit and then building and perhaps even appearing as if they were operating kind of under the cover of darkness, when in fact it sounds like you weren't.
We're trying not to.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing the right things, and we appreciate you coming. We also appreciate the citizens who have voiced their support of this variance request. And so I think that's maybe the only thing is from the board to voice some frustration. You know, we are human, and we hope that these errors don't happen, and we appreciate you going through the process, and apologize on behalf of myself for the unnecessary frustration that must have caused. So
Thank you.
for that, I recommend approval.
Thank you.
So I'll make a comment too. I agree with staff's analysis. Fortunately, in this situation, we have an exceptional kind of condition and the property is unique in shape. So thanks for your comments on the staff report. Any comments, Jeff?
No, I'm good.
So motion made for approval by Jeff, second by Greg. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the variance is approved.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So moving on to item number 5. It's going to be,
Motion for deferral?
so the applicant is present here for this one. So let me go ahead and read the caption here. So variance request to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building. So that's a first variance request. A second variance request to allow parking within the Oak Meadow Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building. And then the third variance request is to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet for the property located at 880 Oak Meadow Drive. Staff?
Thank you. To recap from last month, this 13.3 acre lot is located at 880 Oak Meadow Drive and is zoned RC6 Regional Commerce 6 District. The owner wishes to develop the parcel with a 2-story, 100,000 square feet retail space. There is no site plan submitted for this project. The plans provided for this property represent the desired design of the site. The applicant is requesting 3 variances: to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area, to allow parking within the Oak Meadow Drive frontage area, and to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet. Updated information after the deferral. Since this item was deferred at the December BZA meeting, staff has collected very limited new information regarding the site. After a meeting with the City of Franklin's Planning, Fire, and Engineering departments for a thorough discussion of the site with the applicant, staff came to the same conclusion that with the changes to the layout, the proposal could come closer to compliance with the zoning ordinance than the proposed plan. Lance Fetro of the City of Franklin Engineering Department drafted a staff-suggested site layout, which has been submitted as an exhibit with this request. This exhibit shows a plausible layout that would have come closer to compliance with our zoning ordinance than the proposed plan for 880 Oak Meadow Drive. The pressing obstacles that still remain are the stormwater area along Oak Meadow Drive and the 40-foot utility easement along Riverside Drive. I will now go through staff's updated analysis since the item's deferral. Regarding request 1 to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area. Criteria 1, where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of the enactment of the zoning ordinance, or by reason of exceptional topographic conditions or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions, such a piece of property is not able to accommodate development as required under this ordinance. Since the item was deferred in December, discussion and analysis have shown that it is completely possible to provide the necessary parking with parallel parking in the frontage and/or necessary parking to the side or behind the building, which would be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. The necessary ADA parking can be provided as parallel parking as shown in the staff-suggested site layout exhibit. There is not an exceptional situation within this or with the site itself that prevents compliance with the zoning ordinance in this situation. Staff considers this request a matter of preference and that the hardship is self-imposed. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Criteria 2. The strict application of any provision enacted under the zoning ordinance would result in peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to or exceptional or undue hardship upon the owner of the property. As stated with the previous criteria, discussion and analysis have shown that it is completely possible to provide the necessary parking with parallel parking in the frontage and/or necessary parking to the side or behind the building, which would be in compliance with the zoning ordinance, as shown in the staff's suggested site layout exhibit. There is not a provision enacted under the zoning ordinance that would result in undue hardship upon the owner of the property in this case. Staff still considers this request a matter of preference and that the hardship is self-imposed in this situation. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Criteria 3, such relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. With the same rationale as was given at last month's meeting, the design of the site would not be a detriment to the public good, but it would impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Staff recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to deny request 1. Regarding request 2, to allow parking within the Oak Meadow Drive frontage area. Going forward, I will not be rereading the 3 criteria. I'll simply go through the staff's analysis. Please let me know if you'd like me to repeat the criteria at any point. In regards to criteria 1, again, discussion and analysis have shown that it is completely possible to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. This is shown in the staff's suggested site layout exhibit. There is not an exceptional situation with the site itself that prevents compliance with the zoning ordinance in this situation. Staff still considers the request a matter of preference and that the hardship is self-imposed in this situation. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Regarding criteria 2, as stated with the previous criteria, discussion and analysis have shown that it is completely possible to be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. There is not a provision enacted under the zoning ordinance that would result in undue hardship upon the owner of the property in this situation. Staff still considers this request a matter of preference and that the hardship is self-imposed. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Regarding criteria 3, with the same rationale as was given at last month's meeting, the design of the site would not be a detriment to the public good, but it would impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Staff recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to deny request 2. Lastly, request 3, to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet. As a reminder, this request for an increased setback applies to both Riverside Drive and Oak Meadow Drive because the proposed building fronts both streets. So unless the motion specifies otherwise, it will apply to both street frontages. Regarding criteria 1, with the same rationale as was given at last month's meeting, the setback along Riverside Drive would have to be a minimum of 40 feet because of the public utility and drainage easement. And along Oak Meadow Drive, the stormwater conditions will impact the setback requirements. However, staff cannot determine the exact amount that would be needed for the setback along Oak Meadow Drive. Without further information and analysis, staff finds this criteria is met. Regarding criteria 2, similarly to the previous criteria, the setback along Riverside Drive cannot comply with the zoning ordinance, as it would have to be a minimum of 40 feet because of the public utility and drainage easement. And again, the stormwater conditions will impact the setback requirements along Oak Meadow Drive and will likely not allow compliance with the zoning ordinance regarding the setback. However, staff cannot determine the exact amount that would be needed for that setback without further information and analysis. Staff finds this requirement is met. Lastly, regarding criteria 3, with the same rationale as was given at last month's meeting, the design of the site would not be a detriment to the public good, but it would impair the intent of the zoning ordinance. As shown by the staff's suggested site layout exhibit, the site layout can easily come closer to compliance with the zoning ordinance. For this reason, this proposal does not meet the intent of the zoning ordinance. Staff finds this criteria is not met. Staff recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to defer request 3 because the criteria for granting the variance of 150 feet was not supported by sufficient evidence. In summation, staff's recommended motion is that the Board of Zoning Appeals move to deny the variance request to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building and deny a variance request to allow parking within the Oak Meadow Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building and defer a variance request to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet for the property located at 880 Oak Meadow Drive because the criteria for granting a variance were not supported by sufficient evidence. Without more information on the stormwater management needs of the site along Oak Meadow Drive, staff cannot determine the setback that would be needed. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, staff. Is the applicant present for this item? If you could step forward for us and state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Jeff Rosiak with Gamble Design Collaborative. I have a handout that is a blow-up of information that was included in the staff report.
Thanks. Okay, so what we're looking at, just to clarify here, it's in the packet as staff's exhibit. Is that what this is a mirror of?
This is the base of that drawing without staff's drawing on top of it.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
There are a couple of labels that were added just for clarification.
Gotcha.
I'm just going to really briefly present kind of what's changed since the deferral last month. But as a quick introduction, we firmly believe that in the vast majority of cases, the zoning code provides terrific guidance. In rare cases, strict adherence to the code just isn't possible. In this case, the existing site geometry, existing site topography, existing overhead electrical transmission lines, the site location at the hard corner of Oak Meadow and Riverside Drive, the frontage requirements, and the existing contextual pattern of development are at odds with each other. This site requires a creative solution that deviates from the code. As you all know, any proposed development is required to front a public street, and the building orientation is required to parallel the street. The location of the front door becomes a critical early design decision. So in this case, the low point of the site is along Oak Meadow Drive. This is where stormwater area will be required. And this pushes us to locate the front door along Riverside Drive. We also discussed the 3-to-1 slopes along both the eastern and western property lines, including along Riverside Drive, and the electrical transmission lines along Riverside Drive. So even though the front door is to Riverside, these force the building to push away from Riverside Drive. Since the December deferral, GDC has shared a concept sketch, which is the sketch that's in front of you, illustrating how the building could front to Riverside Drive. In this exhibit, we illustrated how, starting at the existing grade of Riverside Drive, how the maximum allowable slopes that still allow for emergency access, ADA access, these combine to push the building frontage well beyond the permitted setback zone. We recognize the intent of the code to provide a walkable, pedestrian-friendly environment, and we've incorporated a pedestrian zone between the parking and the building. Combining all of these elements, and as seen in an section in an exhibit that was submitted to you all, this combines to push the setback back to 150 feet. Now, we've worded that as a max setback of 150 feet. There is some flexibility as we get into site design that under the MTMC electrical line, we may have some room to shorten that a bit. But as you scroll through the exhibits, you can also see that the setback along Oak Meadow is labeled as 120 feet at the closest point to Oak Meadow. So again, this has been worded out as a max setback. Also, since the December deferral, planning and engineering staff generated a concept that you all have seen in your packet that showed how the building could be pushed closer to Riverside Drive and how parallel parking could be accommodated. We believe that this concept makes the hardships unique to the site evident. In order for this concept to work, the access drive to the front door of the building has been removed entirely. Instead, the primary entrance is 400 feet further to the north, along the northern property line. Parking is similarly separated from the front door of the building. These factors combine in a way that removes the viable uses contemplated in RC6 zoning. In either case, the vast majority of parking is located remotely from the front door, and that's why variance requests, and I think I have the numbers slightly different than staff. I think they numbered at 1 and 2. The variance requests 1 and 2 address this request and request that we be allowed head-in parking in proximity to the front door along Riverside Drive and Oak Meadow frontages. Keeping in mind, those parking areas are 12 feet in the air from the existing surrounding street network. As I said, we are believers in the Franklin Code, but we also believe that not every site works for buildings to be pushed close to the street. In this particular and unique case, this site is surrounded by existing development, and granting the requested variance would allow this site to be developed in a pattern similar to existing pattern of development all around. On the second page of the handout that I give you, which is just an aerial photo, you can see where the pattern of development is established all around the site, with existing buildings pushed back from the street, head-in parking between the building and the street, and we believe this pattern of development is clearly established. We hope you'll consider granting the requested variances. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. I think we'll have questions. Let's, I may go back to staff and just, I know we've got, that's a good point there. Amy. I'm focusing on these exhibits and have lost track. So next we'll open any citizen comments. We'll wait a couple of minutes just to make sure they don't. All right, seeing none, is there a motion to close the public comment?
Motion to close.
Motion made by
Second.
Jeff, second by Greg. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so public comments closed. I was going to turn it back to staff just for comments. We've got a lot to kind of go through here, and I know the applicant will provide more information probably in a couple of minutes also, but thoughts on kind of just, I know in the staff comments, meeting with engineering, planning, working on a design layout, kind of firmly feel that it could meet the zoning. Any additional comments there? Don't feel pressure, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to have input.
Well, I think something that we brought up at the last meeting was that this meeting is not meant to be a design meeting. This is to interpret the code and to see if criteria are being met. So I hope we don't look at this as finding a solution for a potential design, because I do want to, remind everyone that there has been no site plan submitted. So this is all a little bit hypothetical to some degree. We have been looking at a plan that's an idea, and staff, a small group did gather to look at it to see what was feasible. And we did provide an alternative in your packet. We can pull that exhibit up if we'd like to. But, in that very short amount of time that we were able to look at the site, we found a way to provide parking in front of the building, if that's the desire of the applicant, in a way that meets the zoning ordinance. It also allows for fire access around the building in the form of an internal drive. Internal drives are 2 drive aisles that are 11 feet in width, so that's perfectly acceptable for a fire truck to get to use. They include parking, parallel parking on both or one side of that drive aisle, so they can have parallel parking in front of their building that is for ADA accessibility if needed, and you can put parking underneath utility lines. That has been approved in the past. So what staff drew is an alternative that I think could be supported if it's the will of the BZA to allow the setback to be extended.
Okay.
Just so that, can I ask some more questions, Amy? So, thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Obviously, we're familiar with this particular site from last month. And one of the questions I had then, and it still kind of remains, is the fire access and the power transmission lines that are there. In the drawing that staff has provided us, which is called Staff Suggested Site Layout, there's red lines on there, and I just want to make sure I understand what you were saying in that you could park under the power lines. Are you suggesting that on the other side, I don't know how I point this out,
On the highway side, the
on the
riverside.
highway side of the red line,
Yeah.
the furthest right red line, are you suggesting that you would have parking on the other side of that? There, where that pointer is?
What our engineering staff has said is that yes, that we would put, so you can see the little tick marks along the side closest to the building.
I see the parallel parking
So
next
that's
to the building.
parallel,
Yeah.
right. What our engineering department has said is that they feel that you could do a small retaining wall on the side closest to I-65 to allow parallel parking on that side as well, and still comply with the zoning ordinance. So you could have several, and what our engineering staff has told us is that by doing that, you still would provide the parking spaces that they have shown on their original site plan, just in a different format.
Yeah, they do want some parking. I noticed that he was adamant about the entrance too. What did staff say about allowing that entrance to be closer to the front door? They were
So
very
there's-
adamant about that.
While the applicant might be adamant that it needs
Yes.
to be there,
Yes.
staff finds no reason why that needs to be there, and it could be accommodated on the site further up. You can see where staff has drawn a larger,
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
in a way that would comply with the 3-to-1 slopes and allow the fire truck turnaround to get up into that site and around the building. So there's nothing in the ordinance that requires that vehicular access to be right in front of the door. I would argue almost that it's against the intent of our long-term goals,
Okay.
that
That's what I wanted
parking
to
is
know.
meant to be secondary, and the vehicular access is meant to be secondary, and that's what frontage really gets at. Frontage pulls the buildings closer, puts the vehicular access and parking to the sides and the rear of the building.
Okay.
Any additional questions from board members at all? I'll entertain a motion if a board member's ready. I'll ask a question of law. I think per the bylaws, the chairman can make a motion, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to pause, but just wanted to confirm.
Mr. Chair, would you want to see a motion on the entire variance, or would you prefer for the variances to be presented as motions independently?
I think we could handle that either way. I think it depends on which direction the motion is headed. So I think we can handle that either way. If we're,
I would like to present a motion to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area. So just dealing with one of the three.
okay. Okay, so let's just go one at a time then. Does that work for you, Greg?
That's fine with me.
Okay, so it's your motion for approval.
Yep, motion to approve the variance request allowing parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area.
Okay, motion for approval for that first variance request to allow parking within the Riverside Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building. So that motion for approval is made. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, second made. Discussion. I definitely have some discussion.
Okay, yeah.
So my thought is, I'm somewhat frustrated. We're in a position, I feel like staff is in a position with variance request 1, we're not necessarily addressing 2 and 3, but where we're designing a site on the fly in the meeting. I think the last meeting, we tried to provide some feedback, at least have guidance without providing guidance. I feel like we've done that. I feel like staff has spent time in meetings and even drawing exhibits. So I think I'm somewhat frustrated just because I feel like we're at the same spot we were last month. So I don't feel like I could support this, at least motion on this variance request currently. I feel like we need more details. Maybe there's a balance between a full site plan and a conceptual drawing. But I do feel like we're looking at a couple different things. We have kind of staff proposed, we have an exhibit. There's still a lot of issues to work through. That's my
Mr. Chair,
comment.
maybe if I can support my kind of rationale behind presenting this motion.
Yeah, sure.
It's particularly based on the fact that there is the transmission line there. The property is not adjacent to another property. It is facing the interstate. And for those reasons, I think strict adherence of this ordinance for this particular piece of property is of less concern to me. I do agree with your earlier statements around being frustrated and wanting kind of to be able to go forward. And I can also understand there's a bit of a chicken or egg scenario here because this is a rather unique piece of property. And so my intent here would be not to design the property, but also to be very clear about what exceptions will have to be granted in order for this property to be functional. Because it's my understanding that even with the drawings that staff may have presented, there will be a variance that will be needed.
The drawing that staff had, the only variance that would be needed would be for the setback. The parking that's drawn on the staff exhibit is permitted per the zoning ordinance. So the
Okay.
parallel parking does not need a variance.
I'm sorry, Amy, that was my question earlier about asking if there was head-in parking on the other side.
I apologize.
It's okay.
Both sides could do that internal drive and use parallel
Parallel,
parking.
okay.
So in this case, the only variance needed on the staff drawing would be variance
setback.
3 for the setbacks.
For the setback.
What if we capped the parking?
I don't, I mean, I guess you could. Again, that kind of gets into the idea of
I
design.
know.
And again,
I think-
thinking of it as you can very well see this site from the interstate.
Right.
I question whether, well, I'll leave it at that. If it's approved with something that goes against the ordinance, it will be
Right.
very visible to everyone.
Yeah, and I'll add to my comments, I do think, we have a new long-range plan. We have guidelines to implement that. I don't disagree, it's a unique site. I guess the intent of that, I feel like that's not our position as the Board of Zoning Appeals. I feel like that's the Board of Mayor and Alderman, Planning Commission, to set those guidelines. If they don't like the zoning in that area, it's not us that can grant 20 variances on lots that come in. That's not really our position. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on this item. or at least this kind of first variance request. All right, so we've got a motion for approval, got a second from Jeff on that first item on the Riverside Drive, parking in the frontage area. Any more discussion? All right, we'll take a vote then. So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. So 2, so Greg voted for, Jeff voted for, I'll vote no.
Can I, well,
So 2 to 3, first variance is approved. So let's move to the second one then. So the second one's the variance request, just to kind of recap, to allow parking within the Oak Meadow Drive frontage area for a proposed principal building. So we're kind of just on the other side. We're on the other street frontage.
the other street frontage.
Is there a motion on that item?
I would make a motion to disapprove the variance request for the parking on Oak Meadow Drive frontage area, given that I do not believe that it satisfies the 3 criteria for a variance request.
Okay, so motion for disapproval of that second variance request for the parking along the Oak Meadow frontage drive. So motion made for disapproval. Is there a second?
I second that.
Second by Jeff. Any discussion on this variance?
I think it's a different situation. You don't have the high-power transmission lines in this instance. You don't have the interstate abutting it. You have high visibility of the traffic that is residential or commercial traffic, but not interstate traffic. And for those reasons, I recommend disapproval.
Okay. All right, so let's take a vote then. So all in,
I'm so sorry. Could I offer just one bit of color, or is that?
we're already in motion, so we're kind
Fair
of past that point. Thank you, though. So ready for a vote?
Any
All
other
in-
discussion on this, or no?
I don't think so. I would just echo my first comments.
Okay.
So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye as well. So motion for disapproval carries. So variance is denied, that second one for parking along the Oak Meadow Drive frontage. So I think we're down to the third variance request here. So it's a variance request to increase the maximum front yard setback from 30 feet to 150 feet for that same property.
I would, maybe before we get into motions, can I make am I fair to share a thought here, or discussion?
Well, you need to be discussing the motions.
Okay, so,
I'm not sure what your thought is, so I hate to say no, but
well, I think I'll make a motion perhaps, and we'll
Then
see
discussion.
how
Yeah.
it goes. So I would move to defer the third variance request, plainly because I don't think we have enough information, and 150 feet may be needed. It could be 130, it could be 100, or it could be 175. And just out of respect to the process, I don't know that I can give this piece of property a 150-foot setback and feel like it's the right thing that's needed for the construction.
Okay, motion for deferral made, and let's make that to a date certain if we can, just so we're clear in there. So the next Board of Zoning Appeals meeting would be February 2nd, I believe. That's the first Thursday in February.
Yeah, I'd amend the motion
Okay.
as indicated.
All right, so motion for deferral made to February 2nd. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jeff. Discussion?
This is a tough one because I don't think we get anywhere. We're not giving enough direction to make the applicant any clearer than when he came in, and it's tough.
I think that was probably staff's problem as well. It was too much of a open variance, anywhere up to 150, so maybe they were trying to say, hey, you need to get closer on that.
May I comment?
Sure.
We're in the process now, so we're kind of past the point of plans and discussion, at least on the applicant side. All right, so we have a motion for deferral. Got a second. Any more comments? Okay, so let's take a vote then. So all in favor of deferral to the February 2nd meeting, say aye.
Maybe before we take a vote, do we feel as a board that we'll have a different, a different piece of information next time? Or can we make a request of the applicant maybe prior to us just deferring it down the road? Is there a way for us to give guidance so that we're not continuing to have this somewhat fluid discussion?
There really isn't a great mechanism for that directly. The motion you all are talking about is just actually passing it to another meeting, and those are the reasons you should be talking about, like why it should go to another meeting and not be resolved tonight.
Okay.
And that really doesn't include communication or feedback about the site, or that's getting into the nuts and bolts. And
Sure.
what you're really talking about is moving this for discussion later.
Okay. Thank you.
Hate to be a naysayer. I apologize.
No.
And I'll make a comment on that. So I can't support deferral. It's not because, I think it's really that core principle I mentioned on variance 1, where I think we're looking at a whole new plan. So an applicant could come back with a new plan and it's a new variance request. And I feel like that's where we're at with the whole site, and we're kind of back where we were. So that was my thing at the end of last meeting. Let's move forward. We're not moving forward. We're wiggling, I'll call it. So we got a motion for deferral to February 2nd. Motion made by Greg, second by Jeff. All in favor say aye.
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 Okay, so got 2 ayes, got Greg and Jeff. I'll vote no. So motion for deferral passes. So this last variance request is deferred to the February 2nd meeting. So as unaccomplished as that feels, I think that completes this item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess.
I'm joking. Thanks.
All right, so I think we are down to adjournment. So is there a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Greg. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nobody's opposed to leaving, so.
That's right.
That concludes the meeting. Thank you, guys.